Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day, there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. We're going to have so much fun today because we're going to be talking about a little something different. So that's a good teaser, right? But we're also going to be talking about how women can be powerful and start their own businesses and change the world. We love doing that. So please welcome me in joining Stephanie Skryzowski to our program today. Welcome, Stephanie. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much, Deb. I'm great. I am just loving your energy and so excited to chat with you today.
Cool. And I get bonus points because I said your name right.
Yes, you did on the first try, too.
I know, such fun. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this. So Stephanie Skryzowski is a visionary chief financial officer who helps nonprofit leaders better understand and use their numbers to make smart decisions to grow their bottom line and their impact. She is the founder and CEO of 100 Degrees Consulting, which provides financial strategy and bookkeeping services to nonprofits around the globe. So again, Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you so much.
I love it. Well, I always like to start by asking my guests how it is that you got to where you are today. And I know you have a fun story. So tell us about how you decided that this is your vision in life.
Well, yes, I would love to. I will say it did not start out as my vision. Since I was 12 years old, we're gonna really rewind here. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer
Okay.
because I went on a field trip to a courtroom and I was like, ooh, I want to be here. I want to work here. This is so cool. It's so pretty. And so I wanted to be a lawyer. I spent my teenage years reading every single book by John Grisham and thinking about my college career in terms of like, okay, what steps do I need to take to be a lawyer? This is what I want to do. And so I planned my internships. And while I was at a small local law firm in between my third and final year of college, I was like, okay, I need to apply for somewhere to
Right.
work after college. So I Googled literally best law firms in the world. And the first number one result on Google, I was like, okay, I'm going to work there. I knew nothing about it. It was a massive international law firm with headquarters in New York City, right in Times Square. So I applied to be a legal assistant and to my great surprise, I got the job.
Wow.
And so right after college, I got myself down to New York City and started my career as a legal assistant thinking, okay, I'll work here for 2 years and then go to law school. And so I started the job with all of these other people who had graduated from Ivy League schools around the country. That was not my story by any means. I graduated from a small state school in upstate New York.
We like SUNY schools.
Exactly. And so I realized really quickly within a couple months, like, this is not for me. I hate this work. It's so boring.
Oh, no.
I don't like the clients I'm working with. The one client I was assigned was Playboy. And I'm like, this is not real aligned with my personal values.
Yikes.
So but I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm, 21 years old. What do I want to do the rest of my life? I have no idea. But while I was there, I was able to make a connection with a partner at the firm who had also founded a nonprofit organization that was helping farmers in Afghanistan. And so in the 60s, she and her husband had traveled all throughout Europe and Asia in a VW bus, just like exploring, and they fell in love with Afghanistan. And since that time, Afghanistan as a country had basically been decimated by decades upon decades of war. And so this organization was created to help farmers rebuild their agricultural businesses to be able to provide for their families.
Right.
And so there was a position open at this organization. It was the title was like operations assistant, which in nonprofit speak and also entrepreneur speak, that means you basically do
You do
everything.
everything. And other duties
Yes.
as assigned.
Yes. And so there I was responsible for like helping with fundraising and galas and bookkeeping and accounting and financial reporting, among so many other things. And I really took to the finance side of things. I loved presenting the financials and really helping tell the story of the organization's financial health through the P&L, the profit and loss statement, through the balance sheet. And so I really started honing my career in nonprofits and in nonprofit finance. I went to grad school, I got my degree in that, and then worked for another organization that was building schools in 7 different countries around the world, and eventually became the CFO.
Wow.
And so I had sort of like over time kind of crafted this career for myself and never really thought about entrepreneurship until it was time to start a family. That was my personal goal. And my life as a nonprofit CFO, going to Malawi this month and Nepal next month and Nicaragua after that, and then Haiti was like not exactly conducive
Not
to
going to
family
work
life.
with babies.
No, I was like, I don't think I could take a newborn to like the bush in Africa. Like that's
Now
not
it
gonna
would be an
work.
experience, but
Yes, exactly. So I thought, okay, well, I think that there's a need for nonprofit organizations who are smaller to have a CFO, but they probably can't afford to hire somebody full time. Like they can't afford a 6-figure salary. They still need the support. So I said, okay, well, what if I just like try my hand at consulting? And that's the way my business started. I started cold emailing nonprofit organizations whose mission I was passionate about. I had to really care about what they were doing. And they did not have a CFO or finance director listed on their website. So I'm like, okay, they probably don't have a
looks
finance
like there's
person.
a need.
Exactly. And I just started cold emailing them saying, listen, I love what you're doing. Here's a little bit about me. Here is how I could help you. Are you interested in talking? And that was like, I probably sent a couple hundred emails, but people started saying like, yes, I would be interested in that. Let's talk. And so that led to my first 4 clients. And so I was able to leave the nonprofit. I very quickly, like within the first year, replaced my salary. And I thought that I was just going to be a consultant and like, I don't need a team, like a business. What? Like, no, I just want to make the money I was making, help nonprofits and be done.
And be able to be with the kids and all that other stuff.
Exactly. At that time, I had a newborn at home. So I was like, I want to hang out with her. I want to like do some work that I care about. And like, that's cool. But very quickly, like the magic of referrals started to take off, and I started having more work than I could handle. And I was sort of faced with a decision, right? I could either turn them down or refer them to somebody else and just keep doing what I was doing with my clients, or I could hire help to continue to grow. And at that time, I didn't really think that was a choice. I kind of thought like, well, I just have to hire help because I want to be able to help these nonprofits. And so that's what I did. So I started hiring, a bookkeeper to help me with some of that more like lower level work, and then a virtual assistant and things like that. So that was that was 8 years ago at this point. And so today, 100 Degrees Consulting provides CFO and bookkeeping services to nonprofits around the world, and we are 17 full-time employees. We are fully remote company all over the US, and our clients are, like I said, all over the globe. So long winding story and journey to how we got here, but that's what we do today.
I love it. And I love it from the perspective that you knew what your priorities were, and your priority was your family. And then you said, okay, now what do we need to do to go from there? And I think so many people assume, even now, that it's either or. And it doesn't have to be, and the nice thing is when you start your own business, you can set your own hours. Now, I'm sure you discovered one of the things that many of us learn is that, okay, now that means 24/7 and boundaries and things like that are one of the first things you have to set up. But it gives, it's because being, yeah, I cringe when somebody says I'm just a mom. No, 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 no. That's one of the most important things in the world. And so, but you still have that inner drive and that inner need to do whatever it is, and so I love that you were able to find a way that worked perfectly to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we had gone through about 3 years of infertility
Ooh.
struggles. And
Mm-hmm.
so this baby was like long awaited.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept thinking, like, I have been waiting for her
Mm-hmm.
for so many years. And like, I personally cannot fathom the thought of dropping her off
Right. Mm-hmm.
to daycare and
Mm-hmm.
not seeing her for 10 hours and
Mm-hmm.
then having to cram in my like
Mm-hmm.
baby time in the
Mm-hmm.
2 hours
Right.
before she goes to
Mm-hmm.
bed. That was not
Mm-hmm.
the right fit for
Right.
me
Mm-hmm.
at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it was a lot of it was like, what can I do so
Mm-hmm.
that I'm still really professionally fulfilled? Because I knew that I never wanted to be a stay-at-home
Mm-hmm.
mom.
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to have something,
Mm-hmm.
and this has proven to be a really good fit. Now, I will
Mm-hmm.
say that that balance and the boundaries have changed and shifted so
Right.
much since
Mm-hmm.
my first daughter was
Mm-hmm.
born almost 8 years ago. Like my life, my day to day
Mm-hmm.
looks different, in
Mm-hmm.
every sort of stage
Mm-hmm.
as they've grown.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the important piece is, and like you said, it's like I have the power to
Mm-hmm.
create that how I
Right.
want to
Mm-hmm.
create that and for what my family
Mm-hmm.
needs. So yeah, yeah, that's been huge.
Right. And it's one of those things that there's been a lot of discussion about recently, right? And where people are really saying it's either or. Well, no, it's not. And I think that's the frustrating part of it is exactly what you said though. You have the power to decide what it is that you want to do. It's always a choice. And I love that you were able to say, this is what I'm going to do, and then you made it happen.
hmm And we try to really create that environment for our team as
Mm-hmm.
well, because, our team all have family commitments
Right.
that all look different. And
Mm-hmm.
so we try to create a workplace
Mm-hmm.
that even though we're remote,
Mm-hmm.
and they are W-2 full-time employees,
Mm-hmm.
and we
Mm-hmm.
do have hours and we do have
Mm-hmm.
client commitments, but we do try to create a flexible
Mm-hmm.
environment where people can feel free. Like, it's really important to me to go pick up my kids
Mm-hmm.
from school every
Right.
day. And so, okay, let's build
Mm-hmm.
that into your
Mm-hmm.
workday and we can
Right.
make that work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to not only have that for
Mm-hmm.
myself, but also for the team.
Right. And I think we saw that obviously happen a lot because of COVID, where people went, okay, now I have to, my kids are here. I have to dedicate that time to them. So it might mean that I'm working at 11 o'clock at night. But, again, it was about making those choices and figuring out what works best. And for some people, the choice was, ooh, okay, we're going to do something totally different. So, why did you decide, though, that
Mhm, mhm.
nonprofits were where you wanted to go and not the for profit world?
Well, the part of my career, almost 10 years, that was
Mhm.
working in the nonprofit
Right.
space. And I really loved that sort of
Mhm.
connection between the numbers, the finance
Mhm.
side. I was
Mhm.
always really good at math. And so
Mhm.
that it's like a puzzle to me. So
Mhm.
being able to connect the numbers to a higher mission, a
Mhm.
bigger purpose
Mhm.
was really cool for
Mhm.
me. And it wasn't just like, let's see how big we can grow this business. It was like, well, I know that the more money that we have left over at the end of every year, the
Mhm.
more that we're going to be able to help this particular
Mhm.
family next year, or we're going to be able to build more schools
Mhm.
so that more children can have access to
Mhm.
education. Like that connection
Mhm.
for me was huge.
Right.
So that was why we started in
Mhm.
nonprofits. But what I will say is that very quickly after I started the business, I started having small businesses
Mhm.
come to me saying, "Well, hey, can you be my CFO
Mhm.
too? Like
Right.
it's the same, right?" And I said, "Yes." I was like, "Sure." Like cash flow forecasting for a
Right.
nonprofit is
Finance is
like cash
finance,
flow.
P&Ls or P&Ls, all that stuff. Mhm.
Exactly. And the concepts really are similar.
Mhm.
And so I said yes. And so we actually did for many years
Mhm.
have an entire small business portfolio
Ah,
where we
okay.
served small
Mhm.
businesses. At the end of 2022, beginning of 2023,
Mhm.
we actually made the very difficult, but the very
Mhm.
right decision for us to
Mhm.
actually sell that small
Ooh.
business portfolio.
Mhm.
So for a while, it was becoming really challenging to essentially manage two different businesses. We have our nonprofit side where we're marketing to nonprofits, we're hiring people that have expertise in nonprofits. It's a different, we're providing the right training to our team around nonprofit finances. Same thing on the small business. Then I'm like, I have a separate marketing channel for small businesses, separate emails that I'm sending, separate team member. And it was just felt like I was literally running two businesses. And so I did a lot of soul searching around then, figuring out like, where do I want this business to go? Where do I see our legacy? And I landed on nonprofit. That is where my heart is.
Right.
I think the other thing that we did in that time period was really look at our small business portfolio, and we went way too broad. So we had all different types of small business clients. We had
your niche
online
was no
course
niche.
No, it was like, if you have a small business, yeah, we'll take you, which meant that we weren't actually as good as we could have been because we were spread so far. We were spread way too thin. So we ended up selling that, focusing, honing back into our roots in nonprofit. But I think just to circle back to your original question, it really is that like the impact of our work and knowing that like if you have strong financials, like the impact that you can create on the world is, I mean, you can literally change the world, like you said in your intro.
Right. Right. And I love this so much. I, in essence, started my career in public relations working for one of the big guys. I worked for the American Cancer Society. Now, at that point, it was one of the biggest nonprofits in the world, and it's still very large. And so it was very interesting. But I remember one of the things that I learned right away was nonprofit does not mean no profit. And I think that's the mistake that so many people think is, I can't make money. You have to make money or you can't go forward, right? Because you have bills you have to pay, you have employees, you have things you need to do. And so that's where I think people get so confused and need the guidance that you provide. And so I love that's what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times, when we're thinking about the financials and we're looking at a profit and loss statement, we think that revenue and expenses must equal so that there's zero left
so
over
that there's
at the end of
zero,
the
right?
day.
That's not what it's supposed to be.
No, because that means you have no cash cushion, you have no reserve, you have nothing, no runway to help you next year and the year after that. And so the most successful organizations that we work with are generating a surplus. They do have a 6-month cash reserve. They do have, funding that is already carrying over into next year. Those are the ones that are sustainable, that are going to be around and continue to make that impact. So yeah, having zero left over at the end of the year, that's not a good thing.
No. And there's also the debate that we always see about you shouldn't pay a lot to your employees. Like we see that this CEO makes 11 bazillion dollars. Well, you don't like for him to make 11 bazillion dollars, however many zeros that has. But at the same point, if you want good leadership, you have to pay them or they're going to go into the for-profit world. And it doesn't matter, CEO, CFO, department manager, whatever it is. And that's tricky. You're not going to pay an exact comparable salary, but you do need to make because people are doing it because it is their passion. But, you do have to pay for that.
Yeah, exactly. And benefits and things like that. And organizations, I feel like we're almost at the point where nonprofits are no longer going to be able to get away with it. Like you cannot get away with paying somebody $30,000 a year to run an
You're going
entire
to get what you
organization.
paid for.
Exactly. No, we need to pay our nonprofit employees, not just a living wage, but a thriving wage so that they can show up and bring their best selves to work so that they can make the impacts that we want the organization to have. Yeah, it's challenging. I am starting to see things shift, especially with our clients, because we help them understand their finances and we help them with their forecasting and their financial planning so that they can see, oh yeah, okay, I can give my employees a 10% raise this year to like make up for the past 3 that we haven't done anything. I help them understand that. But it is tough.
Right. Well, and then of course you have those people called donors, which, they don't want their money to go to, say, the CEO's, Range Rover. You know, but it's very tricky. And I remember one of so when I was at ACS, my job was communications. And so, dealing with sending out newsletters, doing all sorts of things like that. And it was very tricky because and this was long enough ago that we still did printed newsletters and we put them in the mail and we sent them out, right? And so we couldn't have them high gloss, professionally printed, looking, like a magazine. But because people would go, that's where the money went that we donated. But we also couldn't just copy them off on the photocopier because people would go, they don't even have enough money to use a printer. And so it was very tricky to kind of do that balancing act. Obviously you work with, people who do in kind and all sorts of things, but it is a challenge in a nonprofit to strike that right balance.
Yeah, I think, the nonprofit tax return is the 990, and that's public information. And so
Right.
savvy donors are going to look at
Mhm.
your 990
Right.
before they give
Mhm.
you a significant sum of
Mhm.
money. And
Mhm.
yeah, it is really hard because on the 990, you have to, and this is obviously different than a
Mhm.
small
Mhm.
business, but you have to separate your expenses
Mhm.
between program costs, like
Right.
what's going
Mhm.
directly to the
Right.
programs,
Mhm.
your fundraising
Mhm.
costs, and then your
Mhm.
administrative
Mhm.
costs. And it has been for the longest time, nonprofits want their admin costs to be as low as possible,
Right.
like
10% or less was kind of
5%. Yes,
mhm.
exactly. But what that means is like you are not investing in the right
Mhm.
in a strong enough
Mhm. Right.
infrastructure for your team to do their
Mhm.
best work.
Mhm.
And so the conversation is out there, but like
Mhm.
the sector hasn't changed yet.
Mhm.
Like
Right.
the people are having the
Mhm.
conversations, but we've not
Mhm.
yet changed. So yeah, I think that's huge. And it is something that it's like, can we all just stop judging organizations
Mhm.
on how they're spending and
Right.
let's just focus on impact
Right.
instead? Like,
What
what are
are
the
they doing? Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. And if we're having this massive impact,
Mhm.
but it means that we have to
Mhm.
spend
Right.
whatever on
Mhm.
people or on whatever
Mhm.
resources, like who cares? We've had this
Mhm.
great impact. What does it matter
Right.
how we spent our money?
Right.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. And could you always do more? Sure. But then there's that cost, right? You might be able to provide 10 more free lunch programs, but that means that you're not going to be able to pay somebody else a wage that's comparable with what they should be getting. And
Right.
so then it's like, okay, well, we're going to pay them a little bit less and we'll do five, right? And so it is such a very delicate, as we said, balancing act. How do you do what it is that you are passionate about while still making people stay? Because I think that's one of the other big things, and it's luckily changing. The turnover of employees at nonprofits, it was huge because they, even if it is their passion, their, all those things, they got to eat too. And you see them going to other organizations that are in the for-profit world. Now, the nice thing is a lot of times then they come back as a volunteer, but it's just really tricky. I mean, we all know replacing employees is one of your biggest
Yes.
expenses. So you
Yep.
want to keep them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The mission does not pay the mortgage. So
Right.
we need to make sure we're paying people. And yeah, I was going to say that point
Mm-hmm.
exactly, that yeah, the cost of
Mm-hmm.
having to replace an
Mm-hmm.
employee is huge, and
Right.
it just disrupts everything. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if I'm not sure. I think about this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm writing a book sort of about
Yes,
this.
yes, it's called Do Good and Prosper.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I forgot that I put that in there. Yeah, because in the nonprofit sector, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like we feel like we could either, and it's beyond the
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit sector. It's like we can either have a job that
Mm-hmm.
does good in the
Mm-hmm.
world, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit or being a
Right.
teacher or a healthcare
Mm-hmm.
worker, or
Mm-hmm.
we can make money and live
Mm-hmm.
a prosperous,
Mm-hmm.
thriving life. And it feels like we have to make
Mm-hmm.
this choice, one or the other.
Right.
And part of that is because of the
Mm-hmm.
sector and the
Right.
conditions that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
But my theory and what I'm writing the book about is that we don't have to make a choice. We
Mm-hmm.
can do good
Mm-hmm.
work and we can
Mm-hmm.
live a
Right.
prosperous and thriving
Mm-hmm.
life. And so I feel like that is what I've
Mm-hmm.
created for myself, and it looks
Mm-hmm.
different for everyone. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm just so tired of seeing like
Mm-hmm.
people that are in these jobs that are literally changing the
Mm-hmm.
world, and they like can't afford to get a new
Right.
car, or
Mm-hmm.
like they can't afford to buy a home or what. I mean, that's a much bigger conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
they just can't afford to live their
Mm-hmm.
life the way that they want to,
Right.
for so many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. And they've got that knowledge and that skill and that passion, and you want to keep it. That is so important. But,
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the, obviously financial is the biggest challenge of a nonprofit, because we can all want to do good. We can all, but if there is not money coming in the door, or at least donations and things like that, so in kind type of things, doesn't matter where our heart is and where our soul is, we got to pay the bills.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And after, I think post-COVID,
Mm-hmm.
funding streams have
Mm-hmm.
really shifted for
Right.
nonprofits. I
Mm-hmm.
think in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
actually, a lot of nonprofits saw a big increase
Mm-hmm.
in fundraising,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's from foundations or
Mm-hmm.
corporations or
Mm-hmm.
individuals, related to, COVID in some
Mm-hmm.
way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing that really shift and decline.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, foundations have different
Mm-hmm.
priorities, and corporations are
Right.
tightening their belts, and individuals are
Mm-hmm.
changing the way that they're giving as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so nonprofits, in order to, just like an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
they need to pivot. Yes. And so organizations need to pivot. They cannot do fundraising and run their organizations the way that they have
Right.
been, because things are different now.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like an entrepreneur, we
Mm-hmm.
have to sort of read the room, read the
Mm-hmm.
environment
Mm-hmm.
around us, and make different decisions, do things
Mm-hmm.
differently. I think that's one huge strength
Mm-hmm.
of entrepreneurs. And one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I love about talking to other small
Mm-hmm.
business owners is like, okay, cool. The environment outside of us is shifting. We're going to go this direction,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of ride that wave. And so I think nonprofits need to do the same thing.
Right. And I mentioned that I worked for the American Cancer Society, one of the big guys. But there are so many people who have these passions that are small, and they don't want to be the big guy. They're perfectly fine with, I just want to do this little thing. What do you tell the people who come to you and say, Stephanie, I just want to provide lunches for everyone in the kids in my school district, so I want to start a nonprofit? What do you tell people who say, what are my first steps?
Mm-hmm. My first my first step, or my first thought is like, well, let's think about this. What do you actually want to do? You want
Okay.
to provide lunches for everyone in your school. All right. Is there an organization that already exists, that already
Mm-hmm.
has the
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure and the
Mm-hmm.
systems in place to be able to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's start there. Can we
Mm-hmm.
partner with them? Can we
Mm-hmm.
donate to them? Can we volunteer with them?
Mm-hmm.
We, create some sort of strategic partnership between your company and this
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit, whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, like, what already exists,
Okay.
because creating a nonprofit from scratch is
Mm-hmm.
not as easy as starting a business. Starting a business, we
The
like go
paperwork
online.
alone is Mhm.
Exactly. It's not as easy as just
Mhm.
getting your EIN and filing your
Mhm.
LLC online.
Mhm.
Like, that's so easy.
Mhm.
A nonprofit, there's extensive paperwork
Mhm.
that is involved.
Mhm.
It is not, you don't just get it
Mhm.
in the next 2 weeks.
Mhm.
It could be a 6-month process with the IRS
Mhm.
to get your charity status.
Mhm.
You have to have a board of directors.
Mhm.
You likely have to engage an attorney to help you with all the
Right.
paperwork to
Mhm.
even get the
Mhm.
501(c)(3). So I always recommend starting with
Mhm.
like what already exists that
Mhm.
I can be a part of. If nothing exists,
Mhm.
okay, maybe you are really passionate about leading this project yourself.
Mhm.
Well, there's another option. You could be fiscally sponsored. And so what that means is
Ah.
that there are 501(c)(3) nonprofit
Mhm.
organizations called fiscal sponsors, and they are basically like an umbrella organization for different
Hmm.
projects. And so you can sort of like, attach on to their
Mm-hmm.
501c3.
Mm-hmm.
And so any donations could be, they are filtered through the fiscal
Mm-hmm.
sponsor. Then you get those donations, you can do your project.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this work really well for this exact thing where it's like, I
Mm-hmm.
have this idea, there's this thing I want to do.
Right.
I'm not ready to
Mm-hmm.
go through the whole
Mm-hmm.
process, but like I want to be able to accept
Mm-hmm.
donations for this
Mm-hmm.
and have them be tax
Mm-hmm.
deductible for the donor.
Right.
And so they are fiscally
Mm-hmm.
sponsored.
Right.
And so that's a great
Mm-hmm.
option. In fact, I was just talking to somebody the other day who has grown a project
Mm-hmm.
under a fiscal sponsor to
Mm-hmm.
be a $3 million organization.
Wow.
And now
Mm-hmm.
they're exploring rolling off and
Mm-hmm.
finally getting their
Mm-hmm.
own
Right.
501c3. But like, you can have a little
Mm-hmm.
project or that could grow into a
Mm-hmm.
big project.
Right.
And so if you've done that, then
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's time, once
Mm-hmm.
you've sort of tested the
Mm-hmm.
waters and been like, okay, this is
Mm-hmm.
something legit that I want to
Mm-hmm.
continue on, then maybe it's time to
Mm-hmm.
get your 501c3. But I think those first two steps are really
Mm-hmm.
good to
Right.
consider before just starting a
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit, because there's also
Mm-hmm.
reporting requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Your tax
Mm-hmm.
return is public
Mm-hmm.
information. You
Mm-hmm.
really got to take that
Mm-hmm.
seriously. And some states, depending on where you register your
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit, require an annual audit. And
Mm-hmm.
that can cost
Mm-hmm.
anywhere from
Mm-hmm.
$10,000 to $50,000.
Yikes.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's very
Mm-hmm.
expensive, it's
Mm-hmm.
very time
Mm-hmm.
consuming, and like it's a lot. It's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
responsibility
Right.
to run a
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit. So it's not something that should
Mm-hmm.
just be like, oh, I have this good idea to help
Mm-hmm.
people. I'm going to start a
Right.
501c3.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more to consider.
Right. Well, and then of course there's that little thing because you say 501c3, there's lots of other designations.
Mhm.
I am a volunteer for an organization that is a 501c6. And
Mhm.
so we are a non-profit, but we are a membership organization. And
Mhm.
and we lobby, which that's another little
Mhm.
thing and so that's the other tricky thing that people need to keep in mind is, what is it that you want to do? Because it could be that you are a different designation. And
Mhm.
the hard part with the organization that I'm part of is donations to us are not tax deductible. And so
Mhm.
we have to explain that to people all the time. So that gets a little bit tricky. But
Mhm.
it is a membership organization. We can't change that. But it's the same thing with like a chamber of commerce, a business, that's the same thing. So, so we had a little bit of a brief distraction, as happens sometimes when we're talking to people. So we're just going to jump back into this. We were talking about the importance of knowing what type of organization you need to be, and if you even need to. And it was so funny because I wrote down on my little notes here that I need to talk to you or somebody about fiscally sponsored, because I started an initiative based on working with people who have cancer. And people, I've been doing it for 2 years, and people are like, when are you going to start a nonprofit? Because we're not going to give money to you unless it's tax deductible. And
Right.
so, and I'm like, but I don't, for one thing, I don't want to be cancer girl. And I just want to do my little thing. But so, yeah, see right there, this was absolutely wonderful. So I love this. But,
Yes.
I think what we're showing is that when someone has a passion, they can do something about it. Yes, if something else already exists that fits with what you want to do, maybe look at them. When I was with American Cancer Society, it was long enough ago that there was this other little upstart organization called the Komen Foundation, and we couldn't understand why they didn't want to just be part of us. And clearly,
It worked.
it was so look at that. But and I think we all have these passions. And sometimes it is about I want to do something big, or sometimes it's I just want to go, like the place where we get our cats. They have elementary kids who come in and read to the cats. I think that's the funnest thing in the world.
Love it.
Do you need a nonprofit for kids? No, but it's
Right.
so research what's out there. But then if you have this passion, you need to build your team. And I think that's one of the things that you really talk about is you've got to build the right people around you. You mentioned having 17 wonderful employees. It is about building that team around you. So talk more about that.
Yeah, so it really has been since the very beginning for me. I feel like all about surrounding myself with the right people. And in
Hmm.
the beginning, I didn't have a
Hmm.
team. And for
Hmm.
a while, I didn't have a team, but I was like, how do I meet other
Right.
people who are entrepreneurs like
Hmm.
me, who are
Hmm.
starting businesses like
Hmm.
me? Because I need somebody to talk to
Right.
here. My husband
Right. I'm
works in
lost. I
corporate
need
and
to
he
talk to
doesn't know.
somebody. Hmm.
Exactly, exactly. And so I remember one day, just like I don't even remember what I Googled. I Googled
Hmm.
something and
Hmm.
somehow stumbled upon this Facebook group of
Hmm.
entrepreneurs. And I saw someone posted in there that they were from a town kind of near me.
Oh.
So I messaged them and was like,
Hmm.
hey, could we chat? Like you've
Hmm.
been doing this
Hmm.
longer than I have. And we met for coffee. And
Hmm.
then she shared with me a couple
Hmm.
resources that she had used. And then
Hmm.
that sort of like brought into my network and met people that
Hmm.
way. And
Hmm.
so the first, from the very beginning, I was constantly making the effort. I think
Hmm.
that's an important piece.
Hmm.
Would I have loved
Hmm.
for like a group of entrepreneurs to show up on my doorstep? Sure, but that's not reality. I had to do
Hmm.
the
Right.
outreach.
Hmm.
And so putting in that work to build a community around
Hmm.
myself has always been a huge part of my
Hmm.
business. And whether that is, a community of peers, like
Hmm.
right now, I have a group of 3 or 4 women who have very different businesses
Hmm.
than mine, but we're all sort of at the same stage
Hmm.
in our businesses. And we meet and twice a year and we travel and go on retreats together
Hmm.
and work with consultants and
Hmm.
help each other in our businesses. We talk every other week. And so that's a sort of peer group. And then
Hmm.
I've also had business coaches who I've paid a lot
Hmm.
of money over the years to help me along the
Right.
way,
Hmm.
to kind of meet me where I am and
Hmm.
help get me to that next
Hmm.
level. And they're usually, a few stages
Hmm.
ahead of me in their own
Hmm.
businesses. And so I think having that community surrounding me has been huge
Hmm.
in my growth, really.
Hmm.
The sale of the small business portfolio, like we talked about earlier,
Hmm.
that was the idea of my business
Hmm.
coach. I was ready to just shut it down and
Hmm.
say, well, we can't work with small
Hmm.
businesses anymore. And she's like, Stephanie, no, you sell that. She's like, you have put a
Right.
lot
Hmm.
of effort
Hmm.
and into building the brand, into getting
Hmm.
the clients, into training the team. Like, you don't just
Hmm.
get rid of that, you sell that.
Hmm.
So that's just one of the many, many
Hmm.
things my coaches have helped me with.
Hmm.
And so I think there's that
Hmm.
piece of community
Hmm.
outside of the business that's so
Hmm.
helpful because they do have that external
Hmm.
perspective that sometimes you can't get
Right.
inside your team. So that's a big piece. And then the
Hmm.
other piece is the team internally as
Hmm.
well. And that has also been sort of an evolving journey of figuring out like who is the best fit to
Hmm.
work for 100 degrees?
Hmm.
Who is going to serve our clients really well? What types
Hmm.
of experiences do they bring? What types of values do they
Hmm.
have? And so we started out by hiring just contractors
Hmm.
and having a team of contractors.
Hmm.
And what we found after that worked for a
Hmm.
while. But over time, we found that we really wanted people completely dedicated to
Right. You
our
didn't want them doing a little here, a little there, things like that.
Exactly, exactly. So we have everyone's full time. We're
Hmm.
all in on the clients at
Hmm.
100 degrees, not doing extra side
Hmm.
work here and there. And so yeah, it's been really interesting to find people that are aligned with our
Hmm.
vision
Hmm.
of supporting nonprofits
Hmm.
and also have that financial
Hmm.
expertise. I feel like we've really honed in on it, and I can
Hmm.
say now that the team that we have right now is so passionate about the work that they do. They're so skilled, and our clients love them,
Hmm.
and it makes my job
Hmm.
easier, and it makes yeah, I feel like it
Hmm.
makes everything so much more pleasant. Even
Hmm.
though we're remote, like
Hmm.
we try and build a team culture
Hmm.
where people can, be work friends with each
Hmm.
other and chat about things that are not just
Hmm.
work related. So we have Slack
Hmm.
channels and we get together annually for a team retreat. That's a
Hmm.
huge investment we make in our company
Hmm.
is bringing everyone together
Hmm.
in person once a year from all over the country.
Hmm.
And yeah, and just really being
Hmm.
intentional about building
Hmm.
that culture.
Right. I love it. And it is about being intentional. But it takes it is different when you're remote. Because we see each other on the screen and we see what's behind them, and maybe we connect with them on Facebook, and so we learn a little bit more about them there, and things like that. But and I think that's one of the things that companies that tried out, having everybody work from home during COVID tried to keep and then realized, and so it is a challenge to build those teams, but it can be done. And I think that's the thing that companies need to remember and that organizations need to remember. It might just take a little bit more work. And it's funny, I heard somebody say what they did, because they stayed 100% work from home, was the first 10 minutes of every meeting, and they try to not meeting people to death. But the first 10 minutes, it's required that you're there. So not, but that 10 minutes is their kind of social hour. So it's what'd you do over the weekend? What are your kids doing? Things like that, just to, because when I'm talking about businesses, I say, we buy products from people we know, like, and trust. We work with people we know, like, and trust. And sometimes that is knowing this is what their kid is playing, in the evenings. This is the TV show that they like. This is the book that they read. It doesn't have to be in detail, but just kind of knowing those little things helps that along the way. And then I'm guessing that really helps you to know when you have a new client who approaches you, here's who is the best fit for them.
100%. Yes. And we actually shifted gears in our team meetings. We meet as a team once a month, the first Monday of the month. And we used to use those meetings as kind of like an update time. Okay, each department head is going to update on what's going on in their department. And it basically, we kind of stepped back and we're like, this could be an email. Like, why are we doing this? Yeah. Nobody on the team is talking because they're just being talked at.
Yeah. So like, and you can tell they're like looking at something else, or they've turned off their video, right?
Exactly. So we were like, okay, well, we're going to do something different then. Like, we're going to still send the email with all the updates, but it can be an email. And so we spend the first 15 or 20 minutes doing some sort of little activity where we go into Zoom breakout rooms. So in little groups, and we either have a discussion topic or a little game that we're playing. And it sounds kind of silly, but it's actually it does work. And you get an opportunity to chat with people you wouldn't normally, to learn things about people that you probably wouldn't normally, because our team doesn't all work together. Each client only has one CFO and one bookkeeper assigned. And so CFOs don't usually work with each other because they have each other own
they've got their own stuff they're doing.
Exactly. So this gives everyone an opportunity to connect. And then we usually do another sort of more of like a learning opportunity or a learning session in the second half of the team meeting. And we do the same thing. We break it into breakout rooms. And this time we're a little bit more focused on maybe some sort of soft skills like time management or something, but you're still getting the opportunity to connect more intimately with a coworker that you wouldn't necessarily work with. And so we have done a lot of shifting things around to give more opportunities for that. We have we use Slack as our internal communications software. And so we've got, like a random channel on there, and people will drop pictures of their kids or their pets or what they did this weekend. And we have like, what do we call? Would you rather Wednesday. So every Wednesday, our operations manager drops a would you rather question in there. And one of them recently was, I'm not a Star Wars person, but the question was like, would you rather breathe like Darth Vader or speak like Yoda for the rest of your life? And so everybody chimes in with their answers. And it's silly, but it's like, it's fun, and it takes us out of work for a second and get to know people a little bit better.
Right. And again, that's how you create those cultures of like-minded people. And when there's not a good fit, you wish them well, whether it's a client or whatever, and I think that's the thing is, we are focusing more and more on the fact that we have to build good teams and work with people we like, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit. I remember, and years ago, I had a potential client come to me, and I thought, I mean, it was just, and now he was, there was nothing about him. I mean, wasn't, but I thought, that's just not what I want to do. And so, I referred him to somebody else. I was taking money out of my pocket because he had chosen us, but I thought I could not give 100%. I know somebody who is a better fit. And so it was a win-win, actually win-win-win, because all three were very happy with that. But it is about getting that culture. Now, sometimes we got to pay bills. We've been talking about that. So sometimes you take a client that might not be the best fit, but you change as fast as you can, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is one lesson. I love that you brought that up because that's one
Mm-hmm.
lesson I have definitely learned
Mm-hmm.
in the course of doing
Mm-hmm.
this work. I used to
Right.
say yes
Mm-hmm.
to everyone
Right.
and everything because
Mm-hmm.
I was so scared that like,
Mm-hmm.
well, if I say no to them, like, what if I don't get any more clients?
Right.
And it's
Right.
like, well,
And I got a
that's
bill to pay,
silly.
and they're going to tell people, and
Exactly.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So what I've done is I've taken those clients on and then in within like 5 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that was a terrible mistake. They're either treating us
Mm-hmm.
poorly
Mm-hmm.
or they misrepresented the
Right.
work that needs to,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just is not good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why didn't I listen
Mm-hmm.
to my gut on this one?
Mm-hmm.
I knew that that was
Mm-hmm.
not the right call. And
Right.
so I have learned over
Mm-hmm.
time now to trust my gut. And if
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning I'm like, something's off, this is not going to be a
Mm-hmm.
good fit, then
Right.
I'm just,
Mm-hmm.
politely
Mm-hmm.
decline and everyone moves
Mm-hmm.
on, whatever. So
Right.
yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's such a good lesson for
Mm-hmm.
all entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Like you do not have to
Mm-hmm.
take every bit of work that comes
Right.
across your
Right.
desk.
And it is hard, because we do have bills to pay, and we're thinking they're going to tell somebody else we turned them down. I
Yep.
spent a couple years working as a lobbyist. Now that was an entertaining job. I really enjoyed it, but we had a variety of clients. I mean, from education to health to Hewlett Packard was a client. I mean, so there's all these various things. But I remember the bosses saying, if there is ever a client that you do not want to work for, just say no. We're not going to
Hmm.
ask you why. We're not going to,
Yes.
and there were a couple clients where I was like, I'm just not sure about that. But again, I knew I wasn't going to give 100%. And so it was that, I need to just protect myself. And, but that does bring me to a couple questions about your business.
Mhm.
So, do you focus on just certain types of nonprofits?
Um, f- yes and no. So we work with
Right.
501(c)(3)s.
Mm-hmm.
That's the tax designation with the
Mm-hmm.
IRS.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, like not really. So there's
Okay.
not any one
Mm-hmm.
specific mission
Mm-hmm.
area that we focus
Mm-hmm.
on or avoid.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that we do try to pair our team
Mm-hmm.
with clients whose missions that they care
Right.
about.
Right.
If
Mm-hmm.
we know that we've got a huge animal lover
Mm-hmm.
on the team and we have
Mm-hmm.
an animal shelter,
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, let's pair
Mm-hmm.
them together. That
Right.
would be great because just that deeper
Mm-hmm.
connection. But no, I would say our ideal clients usually are over $1 million in
Mm-hmm.
revenue,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe up to 15 million or so. At that high point,
Mm-hmm.
they've probably usually hired
Mm-hmm.
an internal CFO,
Mm-hmm.
internal finance
Right.
team. Under the $1 million mark, typically they probably don't actually need us. They don't
Mm-hmm.
need a CFO yet. They maybe need a bookkeeper, which is
Mm-hmm.
great,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't need a CFO. And so our like real ideal client is in that 2 to maybe
Mm-hmm.
$7 million range where they're growing, and they maybe this is the first time they're really
Mm-hmm.
getting a handle on their
Mm-hmm.
finances. They've got big plans and need the financial
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure to help them get there.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, yeah, not like a
Mm-hmm.
specific mission area focus. I will say we actually have a lot of international clients. So
Yeah.
they're a
Mm-hmm.
501(c)(3) in the US, but then
Mm-hmm.
they're doing work in, say, Kenya or
Okay.
Malawi
Mm-hmm.
or Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. That was my background, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why we have
Mm-hmm.
had all those
Mm-hmm.
clients because I've always worked in
Mm-hmm.
international development
Mm-hmm.
organizations. It's a little bit of a different model, like accounting
Mm-hmm.
wise and sort of management of
Mm-hmm.
it. And not a lot of people know how that works. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a lot of clients in
Mm-hmm.
that area, but yeah, we also have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
organizations that
Mm-hmm.
work solely in the US.
I love it. Well, kind of along those same lines, how did you come up with the name for your company, which again is 100 Degrees Consulting?
Yes. So it comes from a trip to Senegal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there as the CFO of this nonprofit,
Mm-hmm.
there to support my finance team in country. And I was laying in bed at midnight, and it was literally 100 degrees
Mm-hmm.
in the room that I was sleeping in
Mm-hmm.
on a mattress,
Mm-hmm.
on the floor with a
Mm-hmm.
mosquito net around me. There was no air conditioning. The power was going in and out. So I didn't really even have a fan.
You're like,
And
why am I doing this?
Exactly. That's exactly what I said to myself. I'm
Mhm,
like, well, why am
mhm,
I here?
mhm,
Like, this sucks.
mhm,
I want to go
mhm.
home. I would rather be with my
Yes.
husband in the air
Mhm,
conditioning. Like,
mhm,
what am I doing?
mhm,
Why am I doing this?
mhm,
And I was miserable that
mhm,
night. But I made it through the night. I made it through the night just fine.
mhm,
And I woke up the next morning and my team and I went out to this very, very remote community
mhm,
where the nonprofit that we worked for was building a primary school.
mhm,
And it was the first primary school in this community.
mhm,
And so that meant that hundreds of kids
mhm,
would now have the
mhm.
opportunity to go to school in their
Right.
community
Mhm,
versus having to travel, like walk
right.
7 miles to
Mhm.
go to the next
And they
nearest
wouldn't do
primary.
it. I mean, that. Mhm,
Exactly,
mhm,
exactly. That was not feasible for them.
mhm,
And so we were here and they were about to break ground on the school.
mhm,
The entire community was around, kids,
mhm,
parents, grandparents. Everyone was so excited for this opportunity for
mhm,
education in their community. And I was like, this is why.
mhm,
This is why I'm doing it. This
mhm,
is why I'm making myself uncomfortable. This is why I'm like
mhm,
crunching numbers and working in Excel
mhm,
spreadsheets so I can make sure that
mhm,
this organization has the resources they
mhm,
need to do more of this.
mhm,
And so when I connected that back to my company, 100
mhm,
degrees, like that means to me, like discomfort. People often are
mhm,
really uncomfortable around
mhm.
the numbers.
Right.
And I know though that on the other
Mhm,
side of that discomfort, when you figure things out, when
mhm,
you start harnessing those numbers
mhm,
to make smart decisions
mhm,
for your organization, the impact that's
mhm,
on the other side.
mhm,
So to me, that's what it is. It's like pushing through the
mhm.
discomfort so you can get the impact.
I love it. It's always fun finding out how people name their companies, and because that comes back to the passion, right? When you say your company name, you immediately know why you're doing what you do. And so I love that because a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to call it, Betty Boops, whatever, and
Right.
it's like, no, make it that passion of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And for profit also. I mean, that's typically they're naming it after a person or a product, but you never know. And so
Yeah.
that's very interesting. Well, what are some
Yeah.
other tips that you have for people who are thinking, Stephanie, I'm struggling? I just don't know that we can even make a go of this. What do you tell those folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first place to start, anytime I've ever felt like I'm at a crossroads in my business, I
Mhm,
don't know what to do.
mhm,
Honestly, I come back to the numbers.
mhm,
I really do. I look at like, all right, well, where are we
mhm,
really? Because
mhm,
sometimes our perception of how
mhm,
things are going and reality is different.
mhm,
And so maybe things don't feel good, but
mhm,
actually like the numbers in the bank
mhm,
account and what is in the pipeline for our
mhm,
business is actually like
mhm,
okay.
mhm,
Or vice versa. Sometimes we're feeling good, but we're
mhm,
not really looking at that
mhm,
pipeline and we're going to be surprised later
mhm,
on. So I do always come back to the numbers because what I have found is that so many problems in our business are not really they're not really like a marketing
mhm,
problem or a sales problem. It's
mhm.
it's just a math problem,
Right.
right? Like if we know that we need to bring in another $50,000
Mhm,
in the next 2 months. Okay, well, when you say it like that, that feels kind of scary. Like,
mhm.
oh, we're gonna bring in fifty
Right. How
thousand
are we
dollars.
going to do that? Mhm,
But like, let's break it down. What is
mhm,
$50,000? I mean, how many
mhm,
customers is that? How many
mhm,
clients is that? How many
mhm,
sales is that? Okay, well then that's the total number is
mhm,
say 10. Okay, well then we have 8 weeks to do it. Well, how many is
mhm,
that per week? Okay, let's break it down again.
mhm,
All right, if we need to make a sale and a half every single week, well, how
mhm,
many leads do we need to have?
mhm.
Okay, well, who can I reach
Right.
out to?
So we
Like
get it
when we
down to these
start
little
breaking
bite-sized pieces.
Yes, yes. And that has helped me so much in
Mhm,
so many decisions in my
mhm,
business. It's like, let's take the feelings
mhm,
out of it and let's just do some
mhm.
math. And I
Right.
know like a lot of people
Mhm,
are like, oh, math. I don't like to hear
mhm,
that word. I don't like to do math, but
mhm,
that really is huge.
mhm,
I think another thing, again, related to
mhm,
the numbers that is so helpful is building a forecast. And
mhm,
it's
mhm,
basically just a series of best
mhm,
guesses as to what is coming in
mhm,
and what is going out in
mhm,
your business over the next
mhm.
6, 12, 18 months.
Right.
Because sometimes we're in a slow
Mhm,
period and it's really hard to see
mhm,
our way out of that.
mhm,
But if we can maybe look at last year's
Mhm.
numbers. Maybe this summer it's really slow, but
Mhm.
the fall is when things pick up for you. So you're feeling
Mhm.
real low right now. But like, let's put together a forecast to see, okay, well, by the end of the year, we'll be here and we'll be
Mhm.
okay. So it's just, yeah, I really love putting
Mhm.
together the numbers. There've been times I felt discouraged because there's things I want to do or
Mhm.
areas I want to grow in my business, but I just can't afford to
Mhm.
do it at the moment.
Mhm.
And so I put together the forecast. I
Mhm.
think about, okay, well, what's our revenue going to be
Mhm.
every month for the next 6 months?
Mhm.
What are expenses going to be? Okay, now I
Mhm.
know that by month 4,
Mhm.
I'll be able to invest in this thing
Right.
that I want to do.
Mhm.
And so for me, it always comes back
Mhm.
to the numbers for
Right.
sure.
Well, and we have that passion for whatever it is. But even if we don't like numbers, we understand numbers. And I think that's the big thing. And
Mhm.
plus, you have to have numbers, especially in a nonprofit. How many people did you serve? What do all of those various things, because that's what people who are either going to work for you, work with you, or donate to you, they want those numbers. And,
Mhm.
and you can't say, well, I think we did this and we might have done that. No, they want to know. And even if it's small, I tell people, sometimes it might be a small number, but maybe a percentage would be a better way to talk about it. To say as opposed to, well, we only did 10 things. Well, that was 50% of whatever it
Right.
was, right? That sounds a heck of a lot better. And so, it comes back to that, it's just something that so many people, like we've been saying, have that passion for. They want to do it, but they're thinking, I don't know, or they've started, right, which is where you kind of come in. They've had that passion, they've started it, and now they're thinking, right. So tell
Mhm.
us, how do they reach you and what are the services that you provide?
Yes. So thank you so much for asking. So you can find us at 100, like the number 100, degreesconsulting.com. And we provide fractional CFO and bookkeeping services for nonprofits. And so if you are a nonprofit organization who needs an outsourced finance team, that is exactly what we do. And I actually have a forecast template. If you're
Oh.
like, ooh, that
Hmm.
the forecasting thing you're talking about, even if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small
Hmm.
business owner, this works for you
Hmm.
too. It's at 100degreesconsulting.com/cash. And you can grab the template there. So if you're like, ooh, I love this idea of a forecast, but a blank Excel sheet, gives you
Yeah.
hives, then I've got
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
I love it.
that's
Well, we'll
there.
put a link to that in the show notes. So yeah, I mean, it's just we've been having such a fun conversation, and I think it's so important because so many people think I could do good. And whatever they're doing in their life, they're doing good. We're not saying, flipping hamburgers at McDonald's is not good. But they might want to do something that feeds their soul. And so they're thinking about things like this. And so I love that we have had this discussion. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Oh, yes, that's such a good question. Thank you so much for asking. Um, yeah, I think that it's around this idea of doing good in the world, just like you were talking about, this idea of doing good in the world and being able to live a really prosperous, really thriving life. It is possible. It is not an either or. You don't have to choose doing good in your work or living a prosperous life. You absolutely can do both.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, I've been having so much fun having this discussion with Stephanie Skryzowski of 100 Degrees Consulting. And I'm Deb Creer. Until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.